Level 1, the recruit. You are 21 years old. You are the kind of smart that nobody notices. You sit in the back row of a lecture hall you can barely afford. You work nights restocking shelves so you can afford the mornings. Your father laid concrete for 30 years so you would not have to. His hands are cracked in a way yours are not yet. You have never missed a deadline. You have never been late once. And still, nobody remembers your name in a room. You have started to believe invisible is just what you are. Then one day, a professor who has never spoken to you outside of class asks you to stay after. He tells you your last paper was the only one worth reading all semester. He asks what you are doing this summer. You say nothing, really. He hands you an envelope. It is heavier than paper should be. It is sealed with wax pressed with the shape of an eye. There is no return address. He tells you to open it alone. You wait until you are back in your apartment, door locked, lights off except one. Inside is an invitation to a private dinner. It says only that your potential has been noticed. It says to tell no one. You feel something you have not felt in years. You feel seen. You go. The room is small, the people are older, the conversation is quiet and careful. Nobody explains anything directly. They ask you questions about power, about loyalty, about what you would do for the people who believed in you first. You answer honestly because you do not yet know that honesty is being recorded. At the end of the night, a woman shakes your hand and says, "We will be in touch." You go home and you do not sleep. You realize the first thing they take from an invisible person is the ache of being invisible. Then they hand it back to you, wrapped as belonging. You do not know yet what it will cost. You only know you want more of that feeling. You think an envelope is harmless. It is the cheapest thing they will ever give you. Level 2, the Minerval. 3 months pass in silence, then the envelope comes again. This time it asks you to a ceremony, not a dinner. You are 22 now. You are told to memorize an oath before you arrive. You are told certain words are not to be repeated outside the room. The ceremony itself is simpler than you expected and stranger than you can explain afterward. Candlelight, symbols you do not recognize. A pin pressed into your palm shaped like the eye from the seal. They tell you this is only the first circle. They tell you that trust is earned in tasks, not promises. Your first task feels almost harmless. You are asked to observe a classmate who has been asking questions about the group's funding of a campus program. You are told simply to listen, to report what you hear, nothing more. You tell yourself this is just conversation. You have coffee with her twice. She trusts you. She tells you things she would not tell a stranger. You write it all down that night and send it to an address with no name attached. You feel sick doing it. You do it anyway. 2 weeks later, she quietly drops out of the program she was questioning. You never learn what happened to her specifically, and you learn not to ask. You learn that loyalty upward is rewarded quickly and loyalty sideways is treated like a weakness to be corrected. Your father calls that weak. He asks if you are eating enough. You tell him you are fine. You do not tell him about the pin you keep in a drawer, wrapped in a sock, hidden even from yourself in daylight. You think this is the hard part. Rank 3 is where it stops being a game. Level 3, the Insinuator. You are 24 now. You have proven useful enough to be given a new kind of work. They no longer want you to watch people. They want you to find people, the ones like you used to be, sharp and overlooked and hungry to be chosen. You are given a small budget and a simple instruction. Invite 3 this year. You start attending the same lectures you once sat through anonymously, except now you are the one in the back row watching for the person nobody else notices. You find a girl who reminds you painfully of yourself, brilliant, ignored, working 2 jobs to stay enrolled. You take her to coffee. You ask about her father. You tell her sincerely that her mind is wasted in that classroom. You watch her face change the way yours once did. You hand her an envelope you did not seal yourself, but you know exactly what is inside. You realize almost gently that the perfect recruit is always a younger version of yourself, hungry, invisible, easy to flatter with the one thing they have never been given, real attention. You tell yourself you are doing her a favor. Some nights you believe it. Your father visits the city for the first time in years. He takes you to dinner at a diner, not the kind of place your new circle would ever choose. He tells you he is proud of you, though he does not fully understand what you actually do now. You let him believe a softer version of the truth. You watch his hands shake slightly around his coffee cup, and for a moment you almost tell him everything. You do not. The moment passes, and so does he, back to his small apartment while you go back to yours, which is bigger now and colder in ways he would never understand. You have a title now. You have not learned yet what a title actually costs. Level 4, the Illuminatus Minor. You are 27. You are given your own circle to run, 4 Minervals who report to you the way you once reported to someone else. You learn, slowly and with disbelief, that this is not just a club of ambitious students. The threads run through finance departments, newsrooms, city councils, faculty boards. You start to understand the shape of the thing you joined, and it is larger and older than you imagined at that first dinner. Have you ever wondered how a decision that affects millions of people can be made by a handful of names nobody voted for? You are about to find out from the inside. You are given access, a small line of real influence for the first time. A friend from your old life needs a job and cannot get an interview anywhere. One phone call, and he has an offer within a week. He thanks you like you saved his life. You feel powerful in a way that frightens you slightly. You do not tell him what the favor will one day cost either of you. You marry that year. Her name is Sana. She loves the version of you that laughs easily and works hard and calls his father every Sunday. She does not know about the pin in the drawer, now upgraded to a ring you rarely take off. You tell her your work is consulting, technically true, carefully incomplete. You learn that favors are the real currency of the group, more valuable than money, because money can be refused and a favor cannot, not once it is already inside someone's life. Every favor you hand out is a thread with your name on the other end. You think you understand how big this is. You have seen one hallway of a very large house. Level 5, the Regent. You are 31 now. You oversee an entire region, dozens of circles beneath you, each one running the same quiet machinery you once ran alone. You are no longer collecting information for its own sake. You are learning to use it. A city council member threatens to expose a funding scheme tied loosely to the group. You are handed a file on him within a day, put together by people you have never met. Within a month, a different story about him is in the news, unrelated, damaging, true enough to stick. He resigns quietly. Nobody ever says the group was involved. Nobody has to. You understand now that the organization does not usually punish betrayal directly. It simply demonstrates what happens to people who make themselves inconvenient and lets everyone still inside draw their own conclusions. A mentor of yours, one of the first people who ever brought you close, tries to leave the group entirely 2 years after growing uneasy with its reach. Within 6 months his firm collapses, quietly, from causes that never quite add up. You send flowers to the small gathering that follows. You do not ask questions out loud, because by now you already know the shape of the answer. Your daughter is born that spring. You hold her in the hospital, and you make the same promise every father in every version of this story makes, that she will never know what it costs to keep her safe. You mean it completely. You think power protects the people you love. Every rank from here does the opposite. Level 6, the Scottish Knight. You are 36. You are invited, finally, into rooms that do not have circles or regions, only names. You sit at tables with people whose faces you have seen on the news, quietly, in the background of decisions that were reported as belonging entirely to someone else. You learn which campaigns get funded before the public ever hears the candidate's name. You learn which mergers were decided in this room months before they were announced in any headline. Nobody raises their voice here. Power, you realize, does not need volume once it has patience. You stop asking who is really in charge of things, because for the first time in your life, you are quietly one of the people being asked that question by someone newer, hungrier, younger. Sana notices the distance before you do. You are gone more than you are home. Your daughter starts kindergarten and you miss the first day, in a different country, in a room with no windows, discussing an election on a continent you have never visited. You tell yourself this is temporary. You tell yourself, like every man before you in this story, that you are building something for them. You call home that night and your daughter asks when you are coming back. You say soon. You do not know if that is true. You think you have reached the top. There is no top, there is only further. Level 7, the priest. You are 43 now. Your role changes again, from managing outcomes to managing belief itself. You are not asked to hide the truth anymore. You are asked to help design the noise around it. When journalists get close to real threads connecting the group, your job is not to silence them. It is to make sure they are surrounded by 100 louder, wilder, easier stories to dismiss. Most of them false. Some of them planted by your own people specifically so they can later be debunked, discrediting anyone still asking real questions by association. You learn the deepest secret of the entire structure. The best kind of control was never hiding the truth. It was burying it under so much noise that no one can tell which parts were ever real. Your daughter is 15 now. She finds something online one night, a forum post nomming your face next to a conspiracy theory so wild it barely resembles what you actually do. She shows it to you, half laughing, waiting for you to laugh with her. You laugh. You tell her the internet says crazy things about everyone important. She believes you because she is your daughter, and because the real truth is stranger and quieter than anything a forum could invent. That night you sit outside her door long after she has gone to sleep, and for the first time in years, you feel something close to fear. You think the lie is the dangerous part. It is not. The noise around the lie is worse. Level 8, the prince. You are 50. Your reach is no longer regional, it is national. You do not need to win elections anymore. You simply need to own whoever wins, funding careful amounts on more than one side of contests that matter quietly through structures with names that trace back to nothing. A young journalist, sharper than the others, gets close enough to something real to be dangerous. You are shown two options in a meeting that lasts 4 minutes: discredit her career slowly, or offer her a position inside an organization that will keep her comfortable and occupied for the rest of her working life. You choose the second option and tell yourself that makes you the merciful one in the room. Sana leaves that year. The divorce is quiet, expensive, and entirely without anger, which is somehow worse. She tells you calmly, packing the last of her things, that she has been living with a stranger wearing your face for a decade. You do not argue. You know she is right. Your daughter is 19 now in university, and when a professor mentions your name in a lecture on political influence, she does not correct him. She simply stops raising her hand in that class. She tells you this over the phone flatly, and it costs you more than any file you have ever buried. You think you have already lost the most you can lose. You have not. There is one rank left after this. Level 9, the magus. You are 57. You no longer run circles or regions. You shape the people who do. You sit across from regents and priests half your age and teach them the exact lessons that were once taught to you. Find the hungry ones. Give them the one thing they have never had, real attention, and the rest builds itself. You watch them lean forward the way you once leaned forward at that first quiet dinner, and you recognize the hunger so precisely it unsettles you. Ask yourself honestly, if someone handed you that envelope today, knowing everything you know now, would you still open it? You spent 3 decades climbing toward the center of something, certain the top would finally feel like arrival. Instead, you find a smaller room, filled with older, quieter, lonelier versions of everyone you have ever met inside this structure. Your father dies that winter. In the small apartment he never let you upgrade for him. You sit at his funeral in a suit that costs more than his car once did. And for a moment, just a moment, you are the boy in the back row of a lecture hall again, wondering if anyone in the room will ever remember your name for the right reasons. You think this is where it ends. One rank remains. It is the loneliest one. Level 10, the Areopagite. You are 65 now. You sit on the council that sits above every circle, every region, every name you once thought belonged to the very top. There are rumors even here of something further up, a room you have never seen, decisions made about decisions you thought were final. You have stopped being certain there is a true summit to any of this, only further rooms, further doors, further envelopes waiting to be sealed. You have more influence than entire governments, and none of it buys back a single ordinary evening. Your daughter visits twice a year now, careful and kind and slightly distant, the way you speak to someone you love but no longer fully recognize. She has a son of her own. You hold your grandson in a garden you rarely sit in, and you make him a promise you are not sure anyone in this family has ever managed to keep, that he will never have to become anyone else to feel like he matters. Somewhere in a city you have never visited, in a lecture hall much like the one you once sat in, a 21-year-old stays behind after class at a professor's request. They are handed an envelope, heavier than paper should be, sealed in wax, pressed with the shape of an eye. There is no return address. They are told to open it alone. They feel, for the first time in years, seen. They have no idea what they are about to become. They will learn. They always do. The cycle continues.